It's my privilege to introduce you to our next speakers. Dr. Charles Zelek, Special Advisor to the Department of Energy's Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy. Charles is a Special Advisor to the Department of Energy's Assistant Secretary for Fossil Fuel Energy. Chuck joined the United States Department of Energy in 2009 and served as the Director of Energy Markets Teams and the National Energy Technology Laboratory, which is one of the 17 Department of Energy laboratories, this one located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, followed by a position as Senior Economist in the Department of Energy headquarters in Washington, D.C. I do know that Charles Zelek was also at the Department of Agriculture. And so when we talk about energy and agriculture, you cannot have a more knowledge-based individual who understands both missions of those two departments. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce Dr. Venus Welch-White, who will be co-anchoring this session with Dr. Zelek. Dr. Venus, fondly and affectionately known to me as Venus Welch-White, is the National Rural Energy Program Coordinator for USDA's Rural Development. Venus Welch serves as the National Rural Energy Program Coordinator in USDA's Rural Business Cooperative Services. In her current role, she conducts stakeholder engagement, outreach, business strategy and development, policy support, and facilitates collaborations with the internal and external partners who are obviously the farmers in agriculture, energy, biofuels, business development, and financial institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the both speakers now coming before you. Dr. Zelek, Charles, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you. So basically, and I want to go through this relatively quickly to get to Dr. White, Welch-White, to talk about actual programs and opportunities, at USDA that we collaborate on. What I want to cover at a high level to kick this session off is, an agreement that USDA and DOE have reached across the departments. It's a memorandum of understanding relative to the cooperation and coordination of improving energy development in rural. Go to the next slide, Melvin. So this MOU was actually put into place in October of last year. So it's been a little bit under a year. I believe October 24th was the official signing date. And it was secretary to secretary. So at the time, Secretary Perry and then Secretary Perdue from USDA signed this memorandum of understanding. So what that means is that the MOU actually covers all the departments and missionaries of both organizations. You go to the next slide. So the MOU was established in response to the President's executive orders on rural prosperity, which came out in 2017. USDA was the lead organization in this agreement, focused on economic development in rural communities to include energy. And then as a follow-on, last year in April, the President and the White House put out an executive order on energy infrastructure and economic growth. So that particular executive order requested analyses and assessments of several topics that include a petrochemical industry in Appalachia, as well as the ability to export coal to export markets and the ability to get natural gas to New England for electricity generation. But finally, as mandated in the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, and otherwise known as the Farm Bill, there was a Farm Bill just passed in December of last year, and there was actually a phrase in that Farm Bill that actually mandated that USDA and DOE enter into agreement. Although the agreement we ended up putting into place is much larger than that prescribed in the Farm Bill. So you go to the next slide. Okay, the MOU establishes new and formalizes existing USDA DOE collaboration and has 5 primary objectives. The first is to develop and expand energy and manufacturing related businesses, industries, and technologies in rural. To encourage investments in new or improved rural energy infrastructure, to enhance capital access for energy related businesses and industries, to support rural community investments that anticipate growth associated with rural energy investment, and then to encourage, support, and invest in cybersecurity initiatives and grid improvements. So basically, this agreement recognizes the mission spaces of both departments, where DOE is focused on R&D. It's actually a research organization in the applied sciences sector where I work. And it's focused on bench scale research all the way up to development, to where that R&D is ready to transition over into the commercial space. The area between the transition, the completion of the R&D and the transmission to commercial is often known as the valley of death, where a lot of good technologies go to die. And that's because of the lack of access to capital, maybe the lack of the infrastructure necessary to make a new technology successful in a region. So USDA actually has the mission of funding commercial technologies, and they can not only fund the technologies, but they could also fund that infrastructure. They can fund the communities from everything from housing through community facilities. So recognizing that, both departments jointly looking at these topics together and focusing on specific communities enables us to actually look at the whole picture, to look at setting a community up for success from everything from deployment of the new technology to creating a community that has a workforce and the amenities that would be required to enable that technology and that industry to grow in that area. You can go to the next slide. So that's a high-level overview of the current status and actions to date. We've identified key personnel from across both departments. So we've set up an interdepartmental work group. An administrative structure has been established to implement the MOU, and that was significant. And one thing I would throw out is, although this MOU was prescribed in the Farm Bill, this was mainly before that an internally driven effort. There's not a budget associated with this specific activity or this effort, but what it does do is bring the organizations together to collaborate and focus and inform investments in the programs that they do have, which are sizable. And Dr. Welch-White and myself will cover some of those programs in a little bit. We've set up 5 interdepartmental teams. You go to the next slide, Melvin. I think the graphic would be more useful. We set up 5 interagency work groups, and that's that row in this chart across the bottom. The manufacturing interdepartmental work group, energy industry non-generation. So that's going to cover things such as coal mining, such as natural gas extraction, and so on. Things that don't require that aren't involved with actually the generation of electricity, but are actually related to the energy industry. Then, of course, we have a team on energy industry generation, a research interdepartmental work group, and then a work group that focuses on infrastructure and cybersecurity. You can go to the next slide, Melvin. This slide shows a crosscut of several of the projects. It's not comprehensive, but it does show some of the project areas. There's a legend on the right-hand side which color codes these projects for the actual teams that they're involved with. So for instance, the green blocks are in the manufacturing group. So as an example, we've had a series of USDA, DOE, and we've actually partnered with SBA as well, capital access forums. We've had them around Appalachia so far. And what we do with those is actually assess the region we're going to do these events in to look at where the opportunity spaces are for these communities, and then focus the events on putting out information on the opportunity space that we see, and then the programs that are available across the 2 departments to enable people to participate in that industry, from everything from workforce to the actual construction or expansion of new facilities to participate in the industry. We have manufacturing facility energy audits, natural gas and coal-based projects manufacturing. This is an interesting one. People think about natural gas and coal in terms of electricity generation. This is actually looking at these resources in terms of manufacturing. So natural gas actually fits into the chemical space in terms of manufacturing plastics and so on. It's a little known fact that 70% of the U.S. manufacturing capacity is within a 1-day drive of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's very eye-opening. 70% of the manufacturing that uses plastics. But were you aware that right now, current status, all the plastics and the polyethylene that's used as feedstocks into that manufacturing is actually manufactured on the Gulf Coast? At the same time, 85% of the increase in natural gas production has happened in Appalachia. So basically, the resources being produced in Appalachia, the resources transported to Texas, it's converted into the feedstocks, put on rail cars, and then shipped back up to Appalachia for manufacturing. That's a dead weight loss. There's a lot of inefficiencies in that system. Not to say, I mean, and that's not saying anything, I guess, critical of the Texas petrochemical industry. However, there are a lot of local communities in the region that aren't realizing the full benefit from the resources that are being taken from the region. That income's taken out of the region and actually converted elsewhere. CO2 pipeline networks. We have energy, agriculture, water nexus, drought mitigation. That's an interesting one. That's looking at the water availability out west. Biofuels. This is all the above MOU. So we actually have representation from all the program offices and all the agencies at USDA, and so on. We look at wind, we look at coal plants, we look at solar. You go to the next slide. This is a more specific example of one of the project areas that we're collaborating on. In particular, I'm sorry, I'm trying to bring this back up. Next slide, Melvin, please. Yes. The DOE Better Plans program. So this is actually a DOE Better Building, Better Plant program is a voluntary partnership initiative that drives significant energy efficiency improvements across energy-intensive industrial companies and organizations. So basically, DOE can assist with assessing manufacturing facilities and utilities where the opportunities are for energy efficiency improvements, and then they can partner with USDA to fund the actual improvements. This is a very significant partnership because usually before this MOU, before this partnership with USDA, they might get the information but not have access to the capital to actually implement it. And now with our partnership with USDA, we could actually follow it from concept to actual deployment. You go to the next slide. Okay, within 1 year, okay, so where are we at now? Within 1 year of signing the MOU, the work group will produce a report on opportunities for USDA and DOE to collaborate on rural energy issues. So we're actually in the process, due to COVID, obviously, as Keith had mentioned, everything's delayed right now. But we are in the process of writing this report. The report is going to be submitted to both secretaries. We've identified a lot of opportunities out there. Just to throw a few more out. For instance, for coal, I'm from fossil energy, so these are two things that are very familiar to me. Coal can be used as a building material. We're actually funding research that focuses on taking coal and converting it into the feedstock to make a plywood type material that can then be used for building. The interesting thing about making a plywood out of coal is that it's fireproof, mold doesn't grow on it. It's a third the weight of concrete and 5 times stronger than concrete. And it's basically there forever. It really doesn't degrade or rot like plywood would. There was an analysis from overseas that projects that by the year 2050, the entire stock of buildings in the world will have to be doubled. So we're going to have to reproduce the same amount of buildings that are in existence today. And this is largely due to the urbanization of China and India, the building of condos, things like that. Population increases, and then the movement of people from rural communities into urban settings. So one thing that people don't realize is that if we made that many structures out of concrete, without thinking at all about electricity generation, concrete has the highest CO2 emissions profile in the industrial sector. So if we just produce those buildings by manufacturing concrete, we would blow every Paris Accord goal in existence without even thinking about electricity. So by bringing coal into the mix to build these building materials, we could avoid actually CO2 emissions with coal. So that's actually a pretty novel concept. Another one is actually processing coal and coal waste to make fertilizer. If you think about what coal is, it's fossilized biomass. That biomass has been buried for a significant amount of time. The fossilized biomass is not the only thing that's buried with the coal. It's also that fossilized soil, mineral-rich soil. The trees that would have made the Pittsburgh #8 coal seam would have had to have been 600 feet high. So you can imagine the types of soils that coal was produced in, or those trees were produced in. So there's a technology that could actually separate that soil amendment, or the mineral-rich soil, from the actual carbon. And then when that soil amendment's applied back on agricultural operations, it has the potential to increase yields on depleted farmland by 300 to 400%, and increase the nutritional value of the food grown on that land by 400 to 500%. That's significant. So it's actually revitalizing the soil, which is very relative to agriculture. Go to the next slide, Melvin. So what I want to do is briefly touch on, I must have a lag here. I'm sorry, it's kind of throwing me off a little bit. There we go. So briefly, I want to touch on some of the programs that are available at DOE, or the program available at DOE for large projects. The Title 17 Innovative Energy Loan Guarantee Program. And this is an overview of the funding availability within each one of the DOE program offices. So these are loan guarantees. In fossil energy, where I work, there's actually $8.5 billion, nuclear, $8.8 billion, renewable energy and efficient energy up to $4.5 billion. There's no cap on the upper limit that you can borrow until the program budget authority is expended. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so what do you need to be eligible for this program? It needs to be an innovative technology. DOE is a research organization. It has to be kind of a first of a kind commercial deployment, something innovative that's not out there. It has to demonstrate greenhouse gas benefits. So think carbon capture, for instance, or large scale renewable projects, battery projects. There has to be a life cycle analysis performed, and you have to show that greenhouse gases are reduced relative to a baseline without the technology. It needs to be located in the United States and have a reasonable prospect. You go to the next slide, please. The next slide discusses the financial terms. It's a loan guarantee. It can support debt from a commercial lender or directly from the U.S. Treasury. The loan tenor, it's long-term financing. It can be up to 30 years. Interest rates are set based on the U.S. Treasury rate plus a credit-based spread. Interest rates are historically low right now, so these programs are very attractive to a lot of companies. And equity, the loan program office can guarantee up to 80% of total project cost. So if you're talking $1 billion project, they can guarantee up to $800 million. Most projects have at least 35% equity coming to the table. Now, in particular, what I want to mention is how this is relevant to opportunity zones. Economic opportunity zones, and I usually have a slide in my slide deck that highlights where these opportunity zones are located. But the interesting thing is many of these opportunity zones are in rural areas. They are in areas where agricultural operations are based, and there are a lot of innovative technologies out there that can assist with farming operations. And DOE has a significant amount of bandwidth in terms of technical expertise and analytical capabilities that can help plan and identify the best technologies for these types of operations. At the same time, and what Venus will go into in a second, is that USDA has programs that could actually help with the implementation of these technologies on these agricultural operations. I think there'll be a lot of opportunities out there. I'll leave this presentation just with the comment, though, this partnership has a lot of potential. We are interested in feedback from stakeholder groups and people that would have interest in pursuing some of these avenues, but none of this is successful if nobody comes and applies. So we're getting out there and we're speaking about this to as many people as we can, because our goal is to create a lot of workload for our program specialists due to the volume of applications we're receiving. And with that, I'll turn it over to Venus.
Actually, we haven't gotten Venus on yet right now, but I have there's a question in the queue for you, Charles.
Yeah.
The question is, please give us a brief high level on Farm Bill and who and what will benefit.
The Farm Bill. Well, it's hard, for me to make any comments on the Farm Bill at this point, because most of these agencies over at USDA are actually still working on Farm Bill policy and implementation. So for instance, and my wife works for USDA. They're fighting timelines to try to get signups available. So they're actually in the process. So when a farm bill is passed, so you have programs in the farm bill, and just like a quick 101 on the government process as it goes to the farm bill. This is what I did at USDA. The farm bill is passed, so you have programs. They're written in a very broad manner, so they're very high level. We want you to this is the budget for this program. These are the focus areas. So design a program. The agency actually has to design the policies and the regulations and the implementation protocol for that program, the signups, everything else, ranking tools, and so on. So when a new program comes out, or even an existing program, the agency has the way that it would like to implement that program. Maybe it's based on the way that they've always implemented it. However, when they go forward to implement the program, they have to look at 4 or 5 different alternatives, 4 or 5 different alternative ways to implement the program. And they have to do a benefit cost assessment on each one of those ways. So they have to look at which one provides the most benefit to society. And then based on the results of those analyses, they go to the Office of Management and Budget, and they actually negotiate how that program is implemented. And then the decisions are made. Then the agency has to pick up the work of implementing that program, having the sign up, and actually going forward. So with that said, and seeing as how the Farm Bill was passed less than a year ago, a lot of agencies are actually still in the process of signing that first sign up. So they've actually, went through the process with OMB. They know how they want to implement the programs, and now they're in the process of putting the policies and guidelines out together to their field staff so they can implement the programs to the public. So it's a very odd time right now, because it's right in between the time when that Farm Bill was passed with all the legislative authority and the programs are being rolled out. As far as what types of programs are available, with the lack of Venus is going to get into some of that from her organization. However, you have the Farm Service Agency, which provides commodity payments for instance, beans and corn. You could actually go into your local Farm Service Agency service center, and actually they're co-located with other USDA service centers, and you could put application in. So they're basically price supports, and if if the bottom drops out of one of the commodity prices, then there's the potential there to at least get some supplemental revenue to keep your operation afloat. You have the Natural Resource Conservation Service, where I used to work. That organization's targeted at doing cost share with private landowners to put conservation practices on private land. So that can be grass waterways. You can get incentives for no-till farming, tree planting, waste. You can get cost share for building waste storage facilities for livestock operation. You get energy efficiency audit. And all these things are cost shared anywhere from, I'm not sure what the current rates are. It's been about 10 years since I've been there, but they used to go all the way up to 75%. Actually, if you were in a targeted group, most of these programs at USDA actually have stipulations that maybe 5 or 10% of that program budget is set aside for small, beginning, and minority farmers. So if you fall into one of those categories, I would highly recommend that you go into your USDA service center. There's usually one in about every county in the country that's co-located at FSA, USDA, and oftentimes Risk Management Agency, which actually does crop insurance. So those are the ones that are focused on ag production and ag operations. Then you have rural development, which Venus works for, and they're focused more on economic development. So they're going to actually go into the towns that are located, adjacent to these farms, and they can provide funding for community facilities. They can provide funding, to build a movie theater, rural business service. They can provide funding for workforce development. And that's one thing I wanted to mention as well. DOE also has workforce development funds available, and there's actually a funding opportunity out right now through the Appalachian Regional Commission. They're actually handling the management of that funding availability. It's $1 million, and it's for welding workforce programs. It's the Advanced Welding Workforce Initiative. So that's something, I believe it closes November 13th. If you're with an educational institution that's located within the purview of the Appalachian Regional Commission, that's something you might want to look at because there are significant funds available there to either establish or expand welding programs at community colleges, at workforce training facilities.
I have one more question that just came in.
Sure.
Okay, and the question is, can you provide an example of a project that is in opportunity zones that has received funding, and what was the funding amount?
Well, and Venus would be the person to answer that because they're actually handling the financing for a lot of those projects. I can tell you from a DOE side, well, for the types of projects that DOE handles, usually for our loan guarantee program, that application process, is going to, we're not at the point where we're making any awards yet. I really can't comment on, at this point, we're still collecting the information on the results of this MOU and the actual project information. I have that. I'm hoping Venus can add to that if she can join us. I know there were a few workforce related. I could give you an example of an opportunity zone related workforce initiative that I'm familiar with that didn't receive funding from us, but still go. Okay, it's still that received funding from us, but it's very significant. It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's called the Energy Innovation Center, and it's located at an old. It's an old vocational school from the 30s. It's in an opportunity zone. They've refurbished it, and this is a really interesting business model. And this can work. This was actually being looked into in the Permian Basin in Texas to actually set up educational institutions that are publicly and privately funded by the oil and gas industry in this case, that are providing curriculum by the oil and gas industry, that it actually trains a workforce, creates a pipeline for workforce that's highly skilled, that comes out the other end and is already qualified to step into a position with the oil and gas industry. So that's been very successful, very successful. And to give you another example, and this is something for the benefit of the audience that they might want to look into, and I'll give you the specific example of this one. Economic opportunity zones aren't just about projects. Well, they are about projects, but it isn't just specifically building a business. There's also economic opportunity zone equity funds. And I'm not sure how much that's been covered in this, today in this event. But basically, they're kind of like they're an investment fund. They're usually managed by an investment firm, and any money that's invested in that fund, the agreement is that money will be invested in projects and opportunity zone eligible projects. So the Energy Innovation Center in Pittsburgh I mentioned started one of these funds called the Bedford Fund, and I think their target was to generate $200 to $500 million worth of investment in the first year. They got $2 billion worth of investment in, I think, the first month. They had to shut it down and hire a board and hire a full-time person to manage it. So these investment funds are very lucrative. There's a lot of people putting money into them. And if you are in an opportunity zone and you're interested in acquiring funds, and you have the lack of capital, it might be possible to locate one of these opportunity zone investment funds and go to them, because chances are they're looking for investments. I think there's a fuse on the amount of time that they have to invest that money in an opportunity zone related project. So that actually might be one of the lowest hanging fruit ways to acquire capital if you're located in an opportunity zone. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So thank you so very much, Chuck, for
Good morning.
counterpart at U.S. Department of Energy. I'm very happy to be here. Again, I'm just going to piggyback a little bit. I know we were talking about opportunity zones and a little bit of the farm bill. So I'm going to hop right in. Next, again, my name is Venus White. I represent USA Department of Agriculture, both business and cooperative services. So very happy to be here this morning. Next slide, please.
Got it.
Okay, so I just want, this is really kind of very high level. I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Chuck mentioned, again, really talking about this federal strategy and kind of all things from the standpoint of the federal government and really looking at these opportunities for collaboration for really Department of Energy as well as USDA. So the first bullet I have, I know that there was a question about the Farm Bill, really high level on the Farm Bill, and I kind of just mentioned more broadly. It comes out about every 5 years. It is a very large piece of legislation and pretty much drives everything that we do primarily at USDA and the standpoint of our funding and our programs. And again, I think Chuck mentioned kind of the different types of breadth of things, but it's a really important piece of legislation. I want to say this year's Farm Bill, the 2018, was about 900 pages. And so it really has, the food programs, we're familiar with the SNAP programs, healthy foods, the Ag Marketing Service, Farm Service Agency, Rural Development, NRCS, which Chuck mentioned already. And so really, it pretty much sets out really the blueprint, essentially, for all things that happen within the USDA for the next 5 years. I will say, and I'm kind of just going to pop into the 2020 appropriations, one of the important things to keep in mind is that just because it's in the Farm Bill doesn't necessarily mean the program provides funding, but that's kind of one of those caveats when really evaluating the programs and the implementation. Are there resources that are provided to support implementation of said programs? So I appreciate Chuck's perspective and providing kind of an outline in the standpoint of what that looks like and what the agencies are trying to do internally to either stand up programs or implement changes. But oftentimes it's kind of a lengthy process just because you have to go through all the regulatory, the policy, as well as the funding implementations. And so again, just, we obviously talked about the Department of Energy and the USDA Memorandum of Understanding. So really happy that we are working collectively. In addition, we also at USDA have the Interagency Task Force in Agriculture and Rural Prosperity. And as well as I mentioned, which I think also has been mentioned already, the opportunity to leverage not only RBS programs, but also, federal programs with any type of investment incentives and tax credits. Next slide, please.
Done.
I want to just mention kind of more broadly, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but there are some initiatives that have been recently undertaken across USDA. The first is the Science Blueprint, which provides a overarching theme that is really a framework for USDA's vision on our science initiatives. And the goal is really to provide, organizational clarity, speed, to meet the needs of the agriculture enterprise. And so it is broken into 5 themes: ag science policy, climate adaptation, food and nutritional translation, sustainable ag intensification, as well as value-added innovations. And so there's this is really more internal, there's internal working groups for this particular initiative, but really this is really laid out of what the agency will do kind of across the space for the next several years to really kind of support the scientific aspect. Next slide, please.
Okay.
The other initiative that we have is the AIA, which is our Agriculture Innovation Agenda. And again, I'm not going to speak a ton about this, but I think it's important to make note. Secretary Perdue, which is the Secretary of Agriculture, actually made this announcement during the Ag Innovation Outlook back in February that we have every year. And so it lays out very broad goals for increasing productivity while up to 40%, while decreasing the environmental footprint. And so I would say the Science Blueprint and the Ag Innovation Agenda really kind of work hand in hand. They're very complementary to one another. And again, the Ag Innovation Agenda really kind of establishes capabilities for the next era. Again, we're really looking at the next 40 years, really being able to identify the challenges, the capabilities, and the opportunities as well as problems. And really making sure that we're able to produce more food, and while again having a less environmental footprint. And I'm actually going to ask you to advance 2 slides for me, Melvin.
Done.
And so this is really a broad level to mention the massiveness of USDA. USDA is comprised of actually 17 different agencies and offices that encompass a variety of different missions, mission areas, core objectives. We do have regulatory as well as non-regulatory functions. And again, I won't get into every single type of agency that we have, but just from the standpoint, USDA is very broad. And so while I represent kind of one little tiny snippet, really there's a massiveness in the standpoint of what USDA does, how it touches lots of different lives in a lot of different areas. Obviously, food withstanding that being one of our core principles, but again, really supporting economic development, really looking at crop protection. We have, we've got the Ag Marketing Service. We have the Economic Research Service that really evaluates from the economic aspect of it. We will have, National Statistics Service. NASA has like an Ag Stats They put it out every year. So there's really a lot of resources and a lot of value to USDA. And so I will not be obviously speaking for all of USDA. It's really because of, the breadth. However, I think it's important when we're engaging with new stakeholders to really kind of frame out who we are and what that looks like. Next slide, please. So I really just wanted to mention really looking at rural development. And so rural development is actually, it comes to 3 separate agencies. And our primary focus is to assist rural communities so they're self-sustaining, economically thriving through investments that create ladders of opportunity. So again, this includes 3 separate agencies: Rural Housing Service, Rural Utility Service, as well as Rural Business and Cooperative Service. I represent Rural Business and Cooperative Service. Next slide, please. And so while I'm not going to go into all of these, but I really want to kind of let people make them aware that rural development, because we have these different agencies that function in different capacities, we also have programs that are very specific to those respective agencies. So I'm going to kind of mention kind of very broadly some of the programs that we have. However, just to put kind of, a number out there, we invest across rural development across all 3 of our agencies approximately $200 billion annually. So there's a lot of resources in the standpoint of what we're doing and how we're setting out to accomplish our mission. I will just make note that the community facilities program that Chuck mentioned earlier, that I won't go into a lot of detail today, actually falls under rural housing and community facilities. So it's not necessarily within my agency specifically, but we do work very closely across the board. Next slide, please. So again, for the remainder of this particular presentation, I really will be focusing primarily on our rural business and cooperative services programs. Again, we offer a multitude of programs that support rural business growth. I would say we are really evaluating, looking at capital needs, training, education, entrepreneur skills, and oftentimes our programs are really an intersection of the public-private partnerships. We are often leveraging private dollars within these communities. So again, approximately $2 billion across our loan and grant programs. That was actually reflected for both FY19 as well as FY20. And we also have some programmatic funding designed around persistent poverty designations we had in an FY20 in the appropriations bill. We do not have an FY21 appropriations bill yet. However, it's highly probable that we might have the same thing just because we've seen it before. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So, and I don't see it on my screen just yet.
9003 biorefinery.
Perfect. So I want to talk just broadly about our 9003, our biorefinery, renewable chemical and bio-based product manufacturing, very similar to the innovation program that Chuck mentioned. This particular program takes eligible, new and emerging technologies, typically that are integrated demonstration units, and supports full-scale commercialization. The eligible products that need to be produced can be advanced biofuels, a bio-based product, a renewable chemical, or any combination thereof. Our guaranteed loans actually go as high as $250 million. It is by far the largest program that we have dollar-wise within RBS. And so this is done really, I would say, in a 2-phase application process. Again, for sake of time, I won't go all the way into it. However, it's a tremendous opportunity. You are also able to utilize the opportunity zone funding in addition to this kind of from the capital stack aspect. But it's really supporting, this new and emerging technology. The guaranteed loan basically mitigates the risk associated with it. We will evaluate it from a technical perspective, the technology to do what it says it's supposed to do, as well as financial feasibility. Pretty lengthy process, but a fantastic program. Next slide, please.
Okay.
One thing that happened within our 2018 Farm Bill is the relocation of our bio-based markets program. And so our bio-based markets program, which is, I would say probably commonly referred to as the bio-preferred program, is a voluntarily labeled program as well as a procurement program. And it's now, again, moved from departmental management where it was housed within USDA prior to the 2018 Farm Bill, but now it actually falls under rural development. And so in our 2018 updates, one of the things that we're doing is we're expanding our renewable chemical provisions, as well as simplifying our procurement process, and we're also expanding our NACS provisions. So there's really some opportunity for education and industry partnership. I would say the little picture up there is seventh generation. So while we're not actually promoting seventh generation, it is one of the examples that we use. I think most people have seen seventh generation, but that is actually one of our buy preferred products. We have approximately 11,000 different types of products that span from chemicals, cleaning products, clothing, everything, building materials, textiles. So a lot of different types of products from the standpoint of things that will have the bio-based market labeling program based off of the bio-based content. Next slide, please. One other program that I'm going to mention is our Rural Energy for America program. This is, we actually refer to our 9007 program. This program provides grants as well as guaranteed loan funding for renewable energy installation as well as energy efficiency improvements for agricultural producers as well as rural small businesses. I would say one thing to note in the standpoint of our ag producers from an eligibility perspective is that ag producers are eligible regardless of where they are located, as long as 51% of their income comes from sale of the ag product. Our small businesses are going to be confined to populations of 50,000 or less from a rural perspective. And again, the project needs to be located. The business doesn't necessarily need to be headquartered there. So I would say manufacturing is a fantastic example of potential eligibility where you have a headquarters in downtown, whatever city you're located in, you have a manufacturing facility that's in a rural area. That project would be potentially eligible based off of the location of the manufacturing facility. I think one of the things that's important to note, our guaranteed loans go up to $25 million, and our grants go up to $500,000 for renewable energy, as well as $250,000 for energy efficiency improvements. I would say in our REAP, we did approximately $250 million last year. That number is actually a little bit higher for 2020, about $325. So there's funding available, both on the grant as well as the loan side. Next slide, please. I will also mention the importance of this particular program has a energy audit and renewable development assistance program, which provides grantees the ability to assist rural small businesses as well as ag producers by either conducting an energy audit or actually going in and providing some technical assistance on the renewable energy development side. We have a little bit of a different breadth in the standpoint of the eligibility requirements. State and local governments, and so basically any instrumentality of government is eligible to apply. Federally recognized tribes, colleges, universities, land grants, technical schools, community colleges, rural electric cooperatives, any public power entities, as well as rural and resource development councils, which is not on here, but a small little subset. So that is also a program that has some additional resources that can really move the needle and support applicants that want to either do energy efficiency improvements or are looking at into integrating renewable energy into their operations. Next slide, please. Our EA-RETA application deadline annually is due January 31st. The maximum grant amount is $100,000. And again, this does not have any grant. This doesn't have any matching requirements. So it would just be a grantee. They would have to apply through their state. And then if you would receive the funds, you would need to go out and provide this technical assistance or provide energy audits. With the one caveat, if you do the energy audits, you have to require the recipient person receiving the energy audit to do a cost share of a minimum of 25% of the audit cost. So that's kind of important. Sometimes energy audits can be very expensive. Sometimes there's not people that can actually qualify people to do it depending on where you're located from a rural perspective. So again, this is meant to support that. Next slide, please. I want to just mention the eligible technologies for our REAP program. I would say on the energy efficiency side, what we typically say is anything old to new: lighting, heating, cooling, ventilation, fans, controls, roofs, HVAC systems. Essentially anything that was old that you're able to demonstrate that this new equipment or window, door, insulation, roof would actually yield an energy efficiency improvement. For our renewable energy, we do all things that are commercially available. So we are technology agnostic. We do not favor one renewable over another. So solar, wind, hydro, anaerobic digesters, any kind of like waste to energy projects, biomass, geothermal, as well as wave and ocean power. with the caveat that as long as it's commercially available. So we don't do any research and development, but as long as it's commercially available technology, it is eligible. Next slide, please. Again, I'm just going to broadly mention the minimum grant for our renewable energy system is $2,500. Maximum grant request is $500,000. Minimum grant for the energy efficiency improvement is $1,500. Maximum grant is $250,000. We have 2 priority application deadlines. So while this says deadline, it's really, we accept them year round. However, from a priority funding for scoring, the priority is October 30th, which is not too far from now, as well as March 30th of next year. Next slide, please. I'm going to broadly mention 2 of our loan programs. Our REAP program, which again has the guaranteed loan portion, as well as our business and industry loan program. So just like the grant program for our REAP program, the same eligibility aspects are consistent from our grant to our guaranteed loan. Again, for the purchase of renewable energy systems or providing energy efficiency improvements, agricultural producers located any place are eligible. Rural small businesses located in areas of 50,000 or less. And very similar, our business and industry does similar in the standpoint of eligibility. So rural small businesses. The one caveat I would say between the 2 of these programs is REAP provides funding for small businesses designated by SBA. Business and industry does not have an SBA designation. So if you are a major corporation that no longer falls under the SBA qualifications, but you have a project located in a rural area, you would be eligible to apply for a business and industry loan program. Next slide, please. So again, our Rural Energy for America program does a maximum loan of $25 million. This is a lender-driven program, so the lender would actually apply directly to the Rural Development State Office, and you would borrower, and they'd have to have an eligible project, be located in an eligible area for an eligible purpose. But all of the terms are negotiated between the borrower and the lender. There are variable fees and some equity and collateral requirements that also apply. Next slide, please. Similar to our business industry loan program, also a lender-driven program. There is no minimum loan amount. However, the maximum loan amount is $25 million. And again, this is the USDA is guaranteeing the commercial loan. The terms in those are negotiated between the lender and the borrower. Again, needing to have an eligible project, a borrower that's eligible by business type, as well as using for eligible purposes. I would say the business and industry loan program has a lot more breadth in the standpoint of the types of things that you are able to access, working capital, real estate, fees. You can actually refinance existing debt. So it has a lot more breadth. The REAP program is pretty narrow in the standpoint of the types of things that we would consider eligible. So that's just kind of one thing too. And one thing that I did not mention, and I apologize, the higher the loan amount, the less the government guarantee is. And so if you have, I would say we're capped at 10 million or 70% on both of those programs. But we also just underwent a 1RD rule. So there's a lot of changes that just occurred that were effective as of October 1. So we're still trying to work through our pieces with that. But I would say general rule, the higher the amount, the lower the guarantee, the lower the loan amount, the higher the government guarantee. Next slide, please. I want to just give a few just very quick examples for our REAP program. These are things that we've done. We have a rural electric cooperative that received a grant of $13,000 for the installation of energy efficiency glass roof, as well as radiant heat, fans, vents, and some computerized controls that resulted in a 66% energy cost. Again, we are capped for our REAP grant as a total of 25% of total eligible project cost. One note that you can actually combine the grant and the loan. However, by statute, we are still capped at the total 75% of total eligible project cost. So again, I mentioned earlier, I'm really looking at the opportunity to do public and private equity investment. And so here's a classic example. Next slide, please. I did want also to mention a manufacturing. We had a REAP energy efficiency guaranteed loan of approximately $75,000 that was, and they used this funding to purchase efficient energy, heating, as well as a cooling system. And so again, resulting in reduced energy costs. One thing you can also, is important. And I would say in the guaranteed loan space, you are able to combine the REAP as well as the business industry guaranteed loans. You're able to combine REAP and SBA loans. You're able to combine BNI and SBA loans. And so when you're looking at the opportunity to capital stock depending on the capital needs and really trying to maximize that guaranteed loan amount as the government is going to basically absorb the risk, there's a lot of opportunity and creative financing mechanisms. Next slide, please. Again, one final example, a business and industry guaranteed loan for a heat compressor, a high pass air compressor to improve the efficiency of drillers' operations, resulting in a total project cost of $2 million, and the lender on record as Byline Bank. So again, just another example. And just to put, I would say the framework, REAP has about $500 million available annually for guaranteed loans. Business and industry, their allocation is actually over $1 billion. Last year, they closed $1.3 billion in guaranteed loan funding. So business and industry by far is a larger program, not only from the standpoint of volume, but also by the finance, the amount of money that we actually loan out. So just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Next slide, please. I'm only going to very briefly touch on leveraging not only RBS programs, but federal funding programs through incentives and tax credits. There are a variety of different types of incentives and tax credits that can be used in tandem with federal programs, RBS notwithstanding. So these include opportunity zones, new market tax credits, investment tax credits. There's a new carbon capture tax credit that I'm not familiar with overly, as well as any type of state programs that your local states will have, as well as being able to sell our guarantees on the secondary market. And again, that's consistent for SBA as well as our USDA programs. So next slide, please. I just want to mention just briefly about opportunity zones. I know that there was a specific question about opportunity zones and kind of providing an example. I know that we have gotten applications that are in opportunity zones. We have not actually closed any yet, but there is, people are interested in basically taking our funding, from a USDA perspective and actually applying it through an opportunity zone. One thing of note, 40% of opportunity zones are actually located in rural areas. So there's a huge opportunity to really look at implementing programs and standing up projects depending on what you're looking to do in an opportunity zone and actually being able to leverage funding from the federal government. Next slide, please. So I'm just also going to broadly mention that we have an energy investment map on our USDA website that you can actually go and do a search based off if you're interested in doing biomass, solar, hydro, and kind of see what programs are out there or what's in your backyard. The one thing I note about energy, which I'm sure Chuck will can appreciate, is just because we're on the finance side, energy only has one thing in common with real estate. Location is in fact everything. So it really depends on where you're located, the permitting, the regulatory challenges or lack thereof, or incentives, because sometimes there are incentives for certain technologies over others in certain states. And so really looking at what those opportunities are and where we've invested. So this is a fantastic resource, and I encourage all to head out to our website and really look and see what types of funding that we've done very close to where you're located. I think that's all. So if you're interested in next steps, I would say I encourage you to go to our USDA website, RBS. We are a state-driven program. So all of the programs that I mentioned, with the exception of our 9003 program, that was the really large one, your state rural development office will be your first step. And so I highly encourage you to reach out to either your program specialist or your state energy coordinator for our REAP program, because they would be a fantastic resource to kind of talk to if you're interested in submitting an application, getting some more information, or if you have questions. So, but also my contact information is here as well.
Yes, there's one question that came in is, are these slides available to the attendees?
Sure.
Okay, we'll make sure everyone gets a copy.
But I can't send for Chuck, so I make sure that they're okay for them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Keith, do you have any last words on this this particular session?
Charles and Venus, I cannot thank you enough for a morning full of information. And if you're not full, ladies and gentlemen, on the information that you have heard, maybe you actually couldn't get in and or you've been muted on the audio. And I don't think either one of those were intentional or actually occurred. That has been, wow, a lot of information. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you could understand why early on, as I talked in my orientation of the preparation to prepare yourselves for the first day, and now the second after the first, you must take notes. Now, notes, as you take notes, given the flow of information as fast as it comes in, we recognize it becomes illegible. But they are notes that can be referred back to, notes that can become ultimately a whiteboard opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, in the classrooms, no matter how young you are, that no matter how seasoned and senior you are in the boardroom, we are intentional about providing you today with information that is rich with opportunity. You've heard that term so many times, and you will hear it more and more, especially in our next session. So again, Chuck and Venus, it has been amazing to have both of you on, the progenitors, I would say, of the MOU between USDA and energy. There's nothing more important than food, because it gives life, and it's nothing more important than being able to see in the dark, and everything else that's run based upon power. And I have a lot of questions because I've taken a lot of notes. So thank you very much for a great presentation. This conversation, I'm so glad, is not a one-time event, but a 5-year journey. We will see over the period of time how many communities benefit, how many jobs are created, how many young people move from one grade to the other with an increased amount of curiosity of how they can, no matter how young you are, engage in a career in the energy sector, in the agriculture sector. And we have many, many people like Chuck and Venus who have expertise and experience that can inspire you based upon their information.